The salt-laced air of Oakhaven was Ilara's oldest friend. It woke her each morning, a gentle whisper through the open window of her small cottage, carrying the distant rumble of the ocean and the faint sweet scent of honeysuckle from the trellis outside her door. She loved mornings, the quiet promise they held, the way the world seemed to hold its breath before the day truly began. Today, like most days, Ilara rose with the first blush of dawn, painting the sky in soft mauves and golds. Her fingers, accustomed to the delicate dance of thread and leather, moved with an unconscious grace as she brewed her chamomile tea and toasted a slice of sourdough bread. Her cottage, nestled on a cobbled lane just a stone's throw from the village square, was a sanctuary of quiet beauty. Bookshelves overflowed with leather-bound treasures, herbs hung drying from the kitchen rafters, and a patchwork quilt, lovingly stitched by her grandmother, adorned her favorite armchair by the window. She worked at the Oakhaven Public Library, a charming stone-built edifice that smelled perpetually of old paper and beeswax polish. Ilara wasn't a librarian in the traditional sense. She was the library's bookbinder and restorer, a rare craft in their digital age. Her days were spent mending fragile spines, resewing loose pages, and bringing faded text back to life. It was a painstaking, solitary work, but one she cherished. Each book held a story, not just within its pages, but in the very fibers of its being, a history of hands that had turned its leaves, eyes that had absorbed its wisdom. As she sipped her tea, Ilara gazed out at the waking village. Oakhaven was a place time seemed to have forgotten, in the most wonderful way. No bustling traffic, no frantic pace. Just the gentle rhythm of the tides, the cheerful calls of gulls, and the familiar faces of neighbors passing by with a nod and a smile. It was a village woven from kindness and quiet strength, where everyone knew everyone, and a shared pot of tea could solve most troubles. But lately, there had been a new whisper threading through the familiar hum of Oakhaven. It started subtly, a murmur among the regulars at Mrs. Gable's bakery, a hushed conversation over fresh-caught cod at the fishmonger's. The old lighthouse keeper's cottage, perched precariously on the cliff edge, had been sold. The cottage was an Oakhaven legend. Empty for decades, its whitewashed walls weathered by salt and wind, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the vast expanse of the sea. Locals had always told tales about it, whispers of the lonely keeper, of storms that had nearly claimed it, of a forgotten love story etched into its very foundations. Ilara, ever a romantic, had always found it endlessly fascinating, a silent sentinel watching over their peaceful village. She often walked the cliff path, pausing just before the gate to the overgrown garden, imagining the lives lived within its walls. Now, someone new was coming. Ilara finished her tea, the warmth spreading through her. She pulled on a soft wool cardigan, the morning still held a bite of coolness even in late spring, and gathered her canvas bag. Her walk to the library was a cherished ritual. She passed the sleepy storefronts, the scent of fresh bread already wafting from Mrs. Gable's. Mrs. Gable herself, a woman with a smile as warm as her cinnamon buns, waved from her doorway. "Morning, Ilara. Heard the news about the cottage?" she called, her voice bright. Ilara smiled, returning the wave. "I have, Mrs. Gable. Quite the talk of the town." "Indeed. Someone bought it. Young man, they say. Moving in this week. Hope he knows what he's gotten himself into. That old place needs a lot of love." Mrs. Gable winked, then retreated inside, already bustling. Ilara continued on, a quiet curiosity blooming in her chest. A young man. What kind of person would choose such a solitary, demanding project? Someone who wasn't afraid of a challenge, certainly. Someone who saw beauty in dilapidation, perhaps. She found herself smiling at the thought. Such a person would likely understand the quiet joy of her own work, the satisfaction of restoring something forgotten to its former glory. The library was a haven of hushed whispers and sun-dappled dust motes. Ilara greeted Mr. Abernathy, the head librarian, a kind man with spectacles perpetually perched on his nose, then made her way to her workshop in the back. It was a cozy space, filled with the specific tools of her trade, bone folders, scalpels, presses, and rolls of exquisite leather. The scent of glue and old paper was a comforting embrace. She spent the morning meticulously repairing a first edition of a collection of seafaring poems, its cover water-damaged, its pages brittle. The rhythmic scratch of her knife, the careful brush of glue, the gentle pressure of the press. It was a meditation. It was during her lunch break as she sat on a bench in the small garden behind the library that she saw him. Her gaze had drifted towards the cliff top as it often did. And there, against the deep blue of the sky, was a figure moving around the lighthouse keeper's cottage. Even from this distance he seemed purposeful, his movements fluid. He was tall, his dark hair ruffled by the sea breeze. He carried a heavy-looking wooden plank, his shoulders broad beneath a work-worn denim shirt. He paused for a moment, hands on his hips, surveying the cottage. Then, he disappeared inside. Elara felt a strange flutter in her chest, a sensation akin to turning the page to a particularly compelling chapter. So, he was here. The new Whisper, in Oakhaven. The days that followed fell into a similar pattern. Elara would work, the quiet hum of the library her constant companion. And during her breaks, or as she walked home, her eyes would invariably be drawn to the cliff. She saw him often, scaling a ladder to inspect the roof, meticulously scraping paint from a window frame, or simply standing, hands tucked into his pockets, gazing out at the sea. He seemed to work alone, a solitary figure against the vast backdrop of ocean and sky. There was a quiet intensity about him, even from a distance, a sense of deep focus. She learned his name from Mrs. Gable, of course. Rhys Kincaid, she'd announced one afternoon, presenting Elara with a complimentary scone. Came from the city, they say. An architect with a special love for old buildings, wants to live in that cottage, make it his home. Rhys Kincaid. The name suited him, Elara thought. Strong, yet with a soft cadence. A name that hinted at something ancient, like the stones of Oakhaven itself. A week later, a Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the library door chimed, a sound Elara usually associated with Mrs. Davies returning her weekly stack of historical romances. But the footsteps that followed were heavier, more deliberate. Elara looked up from the ancient atlas she was carefully rebinding. He stood in the archway of the main reading room, silhouetted against the afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows. It was Rhys. Up close, he was even more striking than her distant observations had suggested. His hair was indeed dark, with strands that perpetually escaped to fall across his forehead, and his eyes were the color of the sea just before a storm, a deep, intelligent gray-blue that held an unexpected warmth. He had a slight stubble, and his hands, she noticed, were strong and capable, with calluses that spoke of manual labor. He wore a simple dark t-shirt and jeans, both flecked with dust and what looked like plaster. He scanned the bookshelves, a faint frown of concentration on his face. When his gaze finally landed on Elara, who was half hidden behind her workshop counter, a flicker of surprise crossed his features, quickly replaced by a polite, almost shy, smile. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm looking for anything on the local history of Oakhaven, specifically the lighthouse and the old keeper's cottage." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. She cleared her throat, her own voice a little breathier than usual. "Not at all. You've come to the right place. We have quite a collection." She gestured towards a section of shelves near the large bay window. "The local history archives are over there. You'll find memoirs, old newspaper clippings, architectural drawings, everything we've managed to preserve." He nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners as his smile widened slightly. "Thank you. I'm Rhys Kincaid, by the way. I'm the new owner of the cottage." He extended a hand and Elara found herself taking it. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle. "Elara Vance," she replied, her fingers lingering for a fraction longer than strictly necessary. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Rhys. We've all been quite curious." She immediately regretted the "we've all been curious." It sounded like small-town gossip, which she usually avoided. But Rhys just chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "I imagine so. It's been quite the project already. More challenging than I anticipated, but incredibly rewarding." His eyes held a spark of genuine enthusiasm. "There's so much history in those walls. I want to do it justice." "I understand completely," Elara said, her voice softer now, her earlier awkwardness melting away. "That's what I try to do here with these." She gestured around her workshop, to the open atlas, the carefully mended book spines. "Preserve stories. Give old things new life." Reese's gaze followed her gesture, then returned to her, a look of genuine interest in his eyes. So you're the bookbinder everyone talks about. I heard the library had a skilled hand working wonders with old texts. Elara felt a warm glow spread through her. I suppose so. It's a quiet passion. A vital one, I'd say, Reese countered, his voice thoughtful. To lose these stories, these histories, it would be a tragedy. He then turned his attention back to the shelves. Well, I won't keep you from your work. Thank you for the direction, Elara. You're very welcome, she said, watching him move towards the local history section. He moved with a quiet grace for such a large man, his presence filling the space with a subtle energy. She returned to her atlas, but her focus had been fractured. The scent of old paper was still there, but now it mingled with the faint, earthy smell of plaster and something else. Something fresh and invigorating, like the sea breeze itself. She found herself replaying his smile, the warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his voice. Over the next few weeks, Reese became a semi-regular fixture in the library. He would come in late afternoons, just before closing, his clothes often dusty, his hair perpetually wind-blown. He'd select a stack of books, usually about local architecture, maritime history, or old Oakhaven families, and settle into a quiet corner. Sometimes, he would approach Elara's counter, not just to check out books, but to ask a question, or to share a small observation about the cottage. Did you know, he'd said one afternoon, holding up a faded photograph of the cottage from the early 1900s, that the original keeper had a small apiary? I found remnants of old beehives in the overgrown garden, thinking of reviving it. Elara's eyes lit up. Oh, how wonderful! Bees would thrive there with the wildflowers on the cliff. She found herself leaning forward, drawn into his world. My grandmother used to keep bees. Their hum was the most peaceful sound. Raises? Gaze? I imagine so. I'm trying to bring back as much of the original spirit of the place as I can. It feels important. Another time he brought in a sketch, meticulously drawn, of a restored window frame. This is the last original window in the entire house. I'm using it as a template for all the others. The craftsmanship is incredible. He pointed out the intricate joinery, the quality of the wood. Elara, who appreciated fine craftsmanship in any form, found herself nodding in admiration. It's beautiful, Reese. You have a good eye. He'd looked up at her then, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Thank you, Elara. That means a lot. These small interactions, brief as they were, began to weave a new thread into the fabric of Elara's quiet life. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the gentle chime of the bell that announced his arrival. His presence was like a soft light, illuminating corners of her routine she hadn't realized were dim. He wasn't boisterous or demanding, but observant and kind, with a deep respect for history and beauty, just like her. One particularly blustery afternoon, a storm brewing out at sea, Reese came in, his face ruddy from the wind, carrying a thermos of what smelled like strong coffee. He looked tired, but his eyes still held that persistent spark. Day at the cottage? Elara asked, her voice warm with concern. He sighed, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Just unearthed a particularly stubborn patch of dry rot. It's always something new, isn't it? But the view made up for it. He leaned against the counter, a comfortable familiarity settling between them. The waves are magnificent today, like giants crashing against the rocks. They are, Elara agreed, a small smile playing on her lips. I love a good storm. There's something so powerful and honest about the ocean when it's angry. Reese looked at her then, truly looked at her, and Elara felt a peculiar shift in the air, a silent recognition passing between them. You see it too then, he said, his voice dropping to a softer register. Not just the destruction, but the raw beauty, the life in it. Elara nodded, her gaze meeting his. Always. There's a story in every wave, just as there's a story in every page. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes, crinkling them at the corners. I think we might understand each other, Elara Vance. A warmth spread through Elara, deeper than any chamomile tea. It wasn't a romantic declaration, not yet, but a quiet acknowledgement of a connection, a shared way of seeing the world. It was a comforting thought, like finding a perfectly preserved inscription in an ancient book. As the weeks turned into months, the cottage on the cliff began its slow, beautiful transformation. Elara watched it from afar, seeing new window frames appear, the old whitewash slowly chipped away to reveal the sturdy stone beneath. She saw lights burning late into the night, a beacon of diligent work. And each time Whis visited the library, he seemed to carry a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet joy in his progress. One evening, as Elara was leaving the library, the sun dipping below the horizon in a spectacular display of orange and violet, she decided to take the long way home, along the cliff path. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying the scent of wild thyme and sea spray. As she approached the cottage, she noticed the gate, once rusted shut and buried in brambles, was now newly painted, a soft shade of seafoam green. The path leading to the front door was cleared, and a small, hopeful patch of green shoots emerged from what used to be a tangle of weeds. Whis was sitting on the newly installed porch swing, a mug steaming in his hands, gazing out at the vast expanse of the ocean. He looked peaceful, almost contemplative, the setting sun casting a golden glow on his profile. He didn't notice her at first, lost in his thoughts. Elara paused, hidden by a gnarled old oak tree, hesitant to disturb his moment of quiet solitude. But as she watched him, a profound sense of warmth settled over her. This man, Whis Kincaid, with his quiet dedication and his gentle strength, was slowly but surely breathing new life into a forgotten corner of Oak Haven. And in doing so he was, in some gentle, imperceptible way, beginning to breathe new life into her own quiet world. She decided against approaching him, not wanting to intrude. It felt like a sacred moment. Instead, she took a deep, contented breath, allowing the sea breeze to kiss her cheeks. The old cottage, once a symbol of wistful longing, now seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a promise of new stories waiting to unfold. And Elara, for the first time in a long time, felt a hopeful anticipation for the chapters yet to be written. She turned towards home, the image of Whis on his porch swing, bathed in the last light of day, imprinted on her mind, a gentle whisper against the roar of the ocean. Elara's footsteps on the sandy path were soft, a gentle counterpoint to the distant wash of the waves. The air was growing cooler, the vibrant hues of sunset mellowing into soft lavender and rose above the horizon. As she reached her own cottage, a low, happy whine greeted her from behind the door. "Barnaby, my love," she murmured, twisting the old iron handle. The door creaked open to reveal a magnificent, grizzled golden retriever, tail thumping a joyful rhythm against the floorboards. He nudged her hand, his warm, wet nose a comforting presence, and she stooped to scratch behind his ears, her fingers tangling in his soft fur. "Did you have a good afternoon nap?" Barnaby responded with a happy sigh, following her as she moved through the cozy, familiar rooms. The cottage, with its whitewashed walls and quirky mismatched furniture, was her haven. Tonight, however, it felt different. A new warmth seemed to permeate the silence, a quiet hum that resonated with the image of Whis. She lit the oil lamp on the small writing desk by the window, its soft glow chasing away the encroaching twilight. The desk was usually covered in sketches, charcoal studies of gnarled driftwood, watercolor landscapes of the rugged coastline, or quick pencil portraits of the local fishermen. Tonight, though, her mind felt too full for focused work. She unlaced her boots, letting them drop with a soft thud, and slipped into worn, comfortable slippers. Later, curled on the window seat with a mug of herbal tea, Barnaby's head resting heavily on her lap, Elara watched the moon begin its ascent, casting a silvery path across the dark, undulating sea. Whis, his quiet presence, the way his eyes held a story, the gentle curve of his smile. He was a man carved from the very landscape around them, rugged, a little weathered, but with an undeniable strength and a deep, underlying tranquility. She wondered what brought him to this remote corner of the world, just as she wondered what had called her here. Her own reasons, tied to a quiet heartbreak and a need for solitude, were still raw beneath the surface. But the sea, and now perhaps a certain man, were slowly, gently, soothing the edges. The next morning dawned with a crisp, clear sky, the air smelling of salt and damp earth. Elara rose with the sun, the lingering warmth of her dreams of Whis replaced by a fresh sense of purpose. She walked Barnaby along the deserted stretch of beach below her cottage, the waves leaving intricate patterns in the sand that she yearned to capture on canvas. The cool spray on her face, the cry of gulls overhead, the steady rhythm of the tide, it was all a balm to her soul. As they rounded a small cove, Barnaby suddenly perked his ears, his tail giving a tentative wag. Elara followed his gaze. There, by the small ramshackle pier that jutted out into the water, was Whis. He was bent over a small, weathered fishing boat, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with sawdust. He seemed to be sanding a section of the hull, his movements slow, deliberate, and practiced. The scent of pine and sea air mingled pleasantly. Barnaby, ever the social diplomat, trotted ahead, his tail now wagging with more conviction. Whis looked up, a faint smile touching his lips as Barnaby nuzzled his hand. "Morning, Barnaby," he murmured, scratching the dog behind the ears. Elara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Good morning, Whis," she said, her voice a little softer than intended. "Working hard?" He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. His eyes, the color of the sea on a stormy day, met hers. "Just getting old. Selkie ready for the season. She's seen better days, but she's got good bones." He gestured to the boat, its paint peeling in places, but clearly well-loved. "Selkie," Elara repeated, a smile playing on her lips. A mythical name for a very real boat. "Hey," he chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "Thought she deserved a touch of magic. She's rescued me more times than I can count." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the sketchpad tucked under her arm. "Out for inspiration?" "Always," she admitted. "This place, it's endlessly inspiring." She gestured vaguely at the rugged cliffs, the crashing waves, the distant lighthouse. "Every day it shows me something new." Whis nodded slowly, his eyes following her gesture. "It does that. You see things, Elara, I've noticed. You see the light, the shadows, the little details others miss." His observation, so simple, yet so perceptive, warmed her. It was rare for anyone to truly see her art, beyond just appreciating the aesthetic. "It's a gift, I suppose," she said, shrugging modestly. "Or perhaps a curse sometimes. It's hard to turn off." "Wouldn't want to," Whis said, his voice quiet but firm. "Some things are meant to be seen. You'd be doing the world a disservice if you didn't share it." He looked back at his boat, then at her. "I could use an artist's eye, actually. I'm thinking of painting the hull a new color, but I'm terrible with palettes. Just know I want something that feels right with the sea, but isn't just blue." Elara's eyes lit up. "Oh, I'd love to help. I could sketch some ideas for you, perhaps. What kind of feeling are you hoping for?" A genuine smile spread across Whis's face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Something steady, I suppose. Like a good anchor, and a bit of hope." "Steady and hopeful," Elara mused, already picturing shades of deep sea-worn green, or perhaps a muted stormy gray with a surprising flash of copper. "I'll get to work on it." "Much obliged," Whis said, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Perhaps you could bring them by later? I usually take a break around 5. Got some decent tea if you're a tea drinker." "I am," she confirmed, feeling a pleasant flutter in her chest. 5 o'clock, then." She walked away, Barnaby trotting contentedly beside her, her mind already buzzing with color combinations and brushstrokes. The invitation, so casually extended, felt like a small, precious gift. The cottage, when she returned, seemed to hum with even more energy, no longer just a haven, but a place from which to venture out. The afternoon passed in a blur of charcoal and watercolor. Elara, with Barnaby snoozing at her feet, experimented with different shades, trying to capture the essence of steady and hopeful for a boat named Selkie. She thought of the deep, almost black greens of the kelp forests, the soft, misty grays of a quiet dawn, and the warm, earthy browns of damp sand. She finally settled on a rich, deep teal, a color that felt both ancient and alive, like the sea itself, with hints of copper and rust for the trim, reminiscent of old fishing gear, but with a vibrant, renewed gleam. As the clock neared 5, Elara carefully gathered her sketches, her heart doing a little jig of anticipation. She changed into a soft sage green linen dress, feeling an unexpected desire to look presentable, not just comfortable. Barnaby, sensing the impending outing, gave a hopeful bark. "Yes, you can come too," she told him, fastening her sandals. "Though try not to beg for biscuits, all right?" The walk to Rhys's cottage was shorter this time, the path more familiar. The smell of wood smoke mingled with the salty air, and a faint sound of classical music drifted from his open window. It was unexpected but, somehow, perfectly suited to him. Rhys was on his porch swing just as she'd imagined, but this time he wasn't alone. A steaming mug rested on the small table beside him, and he was carving a small, intricate bird from a piece of driftwood, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as Barnaby nudged his leg, a smile immediately softening his features. "Elara, right on time." He set the carving tool down. "Come on up, tea's ready." She climbed the steps, Barnaby following. The porch was simple, but clearly a beloved space, with a few potted herbs and a well-worn fishing net draped over a rail. She sat in the chair opposite him, placing her sketches carefully on the table. "Smells wonderful," she said, inhaling the fragrant steam from the mug he offered her. It was a dark, robust tea, exactly what she needed. "Just a simple brew," he replied, taking a sip from his own mug. "Now let's see what you've conjured." Elara watched as he picked up her sketches, his gaze moving slowly, deliberately, over each one. His expression was unreadable at first, but then a slow smile spread across his face. This is it," he said, his finger tracing the deep teal hull. "The steady, the hopeful. You've captured it. It's perfect, Elara." His eyes met hers, genuine appreciation shining in them. "You truly have a gift." His sincere praise brought a warmth to her chest, a feeling more satisfying than any gallery accolade. "I'm glad you like it," she said softly. "I tried to think about Selkie and the sea and, well, you." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "May? What color am I?" She considered him for a moment, her gaze sweeping over his weathered face, his kind eyes, the strong set of his jaw. "You're a deep, grounded sort of color," she mused aloud, "like the bedrock, beneath the waves, but with glints of something bright and unexpected, like sunlight on the water after a storm." Rhys looked away, a faint blush coloring his cheeks, a reaction that surprised and charmed her. "Never been described as bedrock before," he muttered, but there was a pleased undertone to his voice. They fell into a comfortable silence, sipping their tea. Barnaby, having received a gentle scratch behind the ears, had settled at Rhys's feet, clearly enjoying the quiet company. "What are you carving?" Elara asked, gesturing to the half-finished bird on the table. "Just a whim," he said, picking it up. "Found this piece of driftwood on the beach a few days ago. Felt like it wanted to be a tern." He handed it to her. The wood was smooth and warm in her hands, its grain following the delicate curve of the bird's wing. Even unfinished, it possessed an incredible sense of movement and life. "It's beautiful, Rhys," she breathed. "You have a gift too, such intricate work." "Just keeping my hands busy," he replied, a touch of melancholy in his voice that was quickly masked. "It's a good way to pass the time." They talked for a long while after that, the conversation flowing easily between them. He told her about the challenges of maintaining an old boat, the changing tides, the local fishing legends. She shared stories of her art, her fascination with the play of light on water, her process of finding inspiration. She learned that he had once been a deep-sea fisherman, traveling far and wide, before settling here in this quiet cove. He didn't elaborate on why he'd settled, and Elara didn't press. Some stories, she knew, took time to unfold. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the porch, Elara realized how much time had passed. "I should let you get back to your work," she said, reluctantly. "No hurry," Rhys replied, but he stood up with her. "Thanks again for the colors, Elara. You've given Selkie a new lease on life." "My pleasure," she said, meeting his gaze. A quiet understanding seemed to pass between them, a recognition of something deeper than just shared interests. As she walked home, the sketches clutched in her hand, the new colors for Selkie seemed to sing with possibility. The thought of Rhys, patiently carving his bird, the unexpected depth of his insight, the comfort of his presence, resonated within her. The cottage, when she finally reached it, no longer felt like just a solitary haven, but a place connected to another, a place where new stories were indeed unfolding, stitch by gentle stitch. The days that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm, punctuated by these small, meaningful encounters. Elara would often see Whis working on Selkie, the new teal paint slowly transforming the old boat. Sometimes, she would bring him a fresh-baked scone or a cup of coffee, and they would talk. Other times, she would simply sit on the sand nearby, sketching the boat, and he would offer a quiet nod, a shared moment of comfortable silence. One blustery afternoon, a sudden squall blew in, catching many of the smaller boats unawares. Elara, watching from her window as the rain lashed against the glass, saw Whis hurrying towards the pier, his oilskins glistening. Without thinking, she grabbed her own sturdy waterproof coat and Barnaby's leash. "Come on, boy," she urged, the wind already tugging at her hair as she stepped outside. Whis might need a hand. By the time she reached the pier, the waves were crashing against the wooden supports with an alarming force. Whis was struggling with a heavy canvas cover, trying to secure it over Selkie's new paint job. The wind whipped at the edges, threatening to tear it from his grasp. "Whis!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "Let me help." He looked up, surprised, but grateful. "Careful, Elara, it's treacherous." She ignored his warning, scrambling onto the pier, Barnaby staying close to her heels. She grabbed a corner of the canvas, pulling with all her might. Together, they wrestled the huge tarp into place, fumbling with the ropes and fasteners, their hands brushing often in the driving rain. The cold wind bit at her exposed skin, but the warmth of their shared effort, the quiet understanding in his eyes kept her going. Finally, with the last rope secured, they stood panting, soaked to the bone, but triumphant. Selkie was safe. "Thank you," Whis said, his voice hoarse, his breath visible in the cold air. "I don't know if I could have managed that alone." "Of course," she replied, her own voice shaky with adrenaline. "We look out for each other, don't we?" He simply nodded, his gaze intense, a flash of something profound passing between them in the chaos of the storm. "Come on," he said, gesturing towards his cottage. "You're soaked. Let's get you warm." Back at his cottage, the warmth of the roaring fire in his hearth was a welcome embrace. He quickly handed her a thick, dry towel and a large, soft wool blanket. "I'll put the kettle on," he announced, disappearing into the small rustic kitchen. Elara wrapped herself in the blanket, shivering slightly, but feeling a profound sense of contentment. Barnaby, equally soggy, was already curled up on a rug by the fire, letting out contented sighs as the warmth enveloped him. Whis returned with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to her. "Hot chocolate," he said simply. "Better than tea on a day like this." She took a sip. It was rich, dark, and utterly delicious. "Perfect," she murmured, feeling the warmth spread through her. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, listening to the rain beat against the windows, the crackle of the fire, and the distant roar of the ocean. Elara felt a deep sense of belonging, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. This quiet cottage, this kind man, the wild beauty of the sea, it was all slowly weaving itself into the fabric of her life, making her feel whole again. "You know," Whis said finally, his voice soft, "when I first came here I thought I'd be alone forever. That was the point, really, to just exist, but you've brought a different kind of quiet, a hopeful one." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "You make this place feel more like home than it ever has." Elara's heart skipped a beat. His words, so honest and raw, resonated with her own unspoken feelings. "I feel the same," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "This place, it was meant to be a refuge. But with you, it feels like a beginning." He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, a silent promise in his touch. The storm raged outside, but inside the cottage, surrounded by the comforting warmth of the fire and the quiet understanding between them, Elara felt a profound sense of peace. The chapters yet to be written were still unrevealed, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to turn the page. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The sea, the cottage, and Whis had shown her that some stories were just waiting for the right moment, and the right heart to begin. The fire crackled, a soft symphony in the quiet room, mirroring the gentle warmth that had settled in Alara's chest. Whis, still on the floor opposite her, simply watched her, his blue eyes holding an unspoken promise that resonated deep within her. The air between them hummed with a delicate tension, not of awkwardness, but of a shared understanding too profound for words. Finally, Whis stirred, a slow, deliberate movement. "More tea," he offered, his voice a low rumble that felt as comforting as the fire's glow. Alara nodded, a small shy smile touching her lip. "Please." He rose, his movements fluid and unhurried, and refilled their mugs from the kettle still steaming gently on the hob. When he returned, he handed her the warm mug, their fingers brushing for a fleeting moment. A spark, tiny yet potent, arced between them, making Alara's breath catch. He settled back down, his gaze still on her, a quiet question in their depth. "It's beautiful here, Whis," Alara said, the words feeling inadequate to describe the depth of peace she felt. She looked around the cozy room, at the flickering shadows dancing on the stone walls, at the worn, beloved books on the shelves, at the scent of wood smoke and sea salt that had become so inextricably linked with comfort. "And you've made it home," Whis hummed softly, a sound of quiet contentment. "It always has been for me, but it feels brighter with you in it." His admission, so simple and sincere, made her heart flutter. He didn't press, didn't demand a response, merely let the words hang in the air, a gentle invitation. They spent the rest of the evening in companionable silence, sipping their tea, listening to the murmuring waves outside and the occasional sigh of the wind. Alara felt an unfamiliar lightness, as if a great weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had finally been lifted. When the fire began to dwindle to embers and the hour grew late, Whis rose again. "It's getting late," he said, his voice soft. "You must be tired." Alara nodded, though a part of her wished the night could stretch on indefinitely. She rose too, feeling a little clumsy, her legs still feeling the remnants of the day's long walk. At the doorway to her room she paused, turning to face him. "Thank you, Whis," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." He simply smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Sleep well, Alara." As she lay in bed, the soft sounds of the cottage wrapping around her like a warm blanket, Alara thought of Whis. She thought of his quiet strength, his gentle understanding, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The storm that had raged within her for so long had finally calmed, leaving behind a tranquil sea, shimmering with the promise of dawn. For the first time in years, she fell asleep, not with a mind buzzing with anxieties and deadlines, but with a heart full of quiet anticipation. The next morning, the world outside was reborn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky scrubbed clean and a sea that sparkled under a hesitant sun. Alara woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the distant cry of gulls. She found Whis in the kitchen, already at the stove, flipping pancakes. The sight of him, apron-clad and humming a tuneless melody, sent another wave of warmth through her. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little husky with sleep. He turned, his smile immediate and easy. "Morning, Alara. Thought you might be hungry. Coffee's ready." They ate breakfast together, the silence between them now completely comfortable, punctuated by the clinking of forks and the gentle pour of syrup. Alara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known was possible outside the pages of her own stories. After breakfast, Whis suggested a walk along the beach. "The tide will be out, good for finding treasures," he said, his eyes sparkling with a childlike enthusiasm. Alara agreed instantly. The air was crisp and invigorating, carrying the invigorating scent of salt and damp earth. They walked side by side, their boots sinking slightly into the wet sand, the waves retreating with a soft hiss. Whis pointed out different types of shells, explaining their origins, his voice low and knowledgeable. He showed her how to spot sea glass, fragments of old bottles tumbled smooth by the ocean, each piece a tiny jewel. "It's like the sea is telling its own stories, isn't it?" Alara mused, holding up a piece of milky green glass, translucent against the light. "Each one with a journey, a past, before it washes up here, transformed." Whis nodded, his gaze distant, thoughtful. "The sea holds many stories, some visible, some only whispered on the wind." His tone held a hint of melancholy, a fleeting shadow that crossed his face before he brightened. It's why I like being near it. It reminds you that even the broken pieces can become beautiful again, given enough time and the right currents. Elara looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the depth of his connection to this place, to the wild, untamed beauty of the ocean. She wondered about his own stories, the ones he kept close, guarded like the sea itself. But she didn't press. She knew intuitively that he would share them when he was ready, just as she was slowly learning to share hers. They collected a handful of treasures, a perfect scallop shell, a piece of vibrant blue sea glass, a smooth gray pebble that fit perfectly in Elara's palm. As they turned back towards the cottage, the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in soft pastels. I have a small workshop, Whis said suddenly, as if reading her mind. If you'd like to see it. Elara's eyes lit up. I'd love to. His workshop was a small, weather-beaten shed nestled behind the cottage, smelling faintly of sawdust and varnish. Inside, it was a marvel of organized chaos. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, wood shavings littered the floor, and various half-finished projects sat on a sturdy workbench. There were small, intricately carved wooden birds, sturdy miniature boats, and a collection of salvaged driftwood waiting to be transformed. I carve, Whis explained, picking up a small, smooth piece of oak. Mostly local birds, sometimes figures or just abstract shapes that the wood suggests. It helps me. He gestured to a larger, more complex piece, a detailed carving of a fishing trawler, its nets painstakingly rendered. This one's for old Thomas down at the harbor, his last boat before he retired. Elara ran her fingers over a smooth, finished piece, a perfectly rendered puffin, its expression almost comical in its lifelike detail. These are incredible, Whis. You have such a talent. He shrugged, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. It's just something I do. Keeps my hands busy, my mind clear. He paused and looked at her. What about you, Elara? You mentioned you write. What kind of stories? Elara felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach, but this time, it was softer, less constricting. I used to write historical fiction, she admitted. Grand, sweeping romances often set in dramatic landscapes. She gave a wry smile. My editor loved them, but lately, the words just haven't come. It's like the well's dried up. Perhaps you've been looking in the wrong well, Whis suggested gently, his eyes thoughtful. Or perhaps you just needed a different landscape. He looked around his workshop, then back at her. The stories are everywhere, Elara. In the wood, in the sea, in the people of St. Jude's Cove. Sometimes you just need to listen. His words resonated deeply. She had been so focused on the pressure, on the expectations, that she had forgotten how to simply listen. The quiet encouragement in his voice was more effective than any pep talk her editor had ever given her. Later that afternoon, they walked to the small village of St. Jude's Cove. It was a quaint, charming place, with cobbled streets winding between brightly painted cottages, a small general store, a bustling pub, and a tiny ancient church overlooking the harbor. As they walked, Whis greeted nearly everyone by name, a warm smile and an easy word for each person. He was clearly a beloved figure in the community. Whis, my boy, good to see you, boomed a hearty voice from the doorway of the general store. Mrs. Gable, a woman with a shock of silver hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief, emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She took in Elara with a quick assessing glance, then her smile widened. And who's this lovely young lady you've brought with you? Whis's cheeks flushed faintly. Mrs. Gable, this is Elara. She's staying at the cottage for a while. Ah, the writer, Mrs. Gable exclaimed, her eyes twinkling. Heard you'd arrived. Welcome to St. Jude's Cove, dear. Whis here doesn't often bring visitors around. Must be special. She winked conspiratorially at Elara, who felt a blush of her own rise. Elara managed a shy smile. It's lovely to be here, Mrs. Gable. It's truly beautiful. It is that, Mrs. Gable agreed, casting a fond look around the village. And Whis is a good man. Takes care of things. You'll be safe here, dearie? Well, come on in, don't just stand there gawking. I've got the freshest bread in all of Cornwall, just out of the oven. Inside the store, the scent of warm bread, spices, and old wood was intoxicating. Elara picked up a few essentials, while Whis chatted with Mrs. Gable about the fishing boats and the upcoming village fete. She observed how effortlessly he fit into this world, how genuinely he was liked. It made her realize just how much she had been missing, living in her solitary city bubble. As they left the store, laden with a fresh loaf of bread, some local cheese, and a jar of homemade jam, Alara's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart sinking slightly as she saw the familiar name on the screen, her editor, Evelyn. She hesitated, then sighed. "It's Evelyn," she told Reese, a trace of her old anxiety creeping into her voice. Reese simply nodded. "Take your time, I'll be here." She walked a little distance away, needing a moment of privacy. "Hello, Evelyn," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Alara, finally you answer." Evelyn's voice, sharp and brisk, crackled through the phone. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all week. Have you made any progress on the manuscript? The deadline is looming, you know, and we really need those chapters." Alara took a deep breath, the scent of the sea a calming balm. "Evelyn, I'm still working on it, but I've been doing some thinking." "Thinking isn't writing, Alara," Evelyn cut in, her impatience clear. "We have a contract. The advance has been paid. You need to deliver." "I know," Alara said, her voice gaining a surprising firmness. "And I will, but I don't think I can write the story you want right now. Not in the way I used to." She paused, then took a leap of faith. "I need to write something different, something that feels true to me, now." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Evelyn's voice, colder this time. "Alara, we've invested a lot in you. This isn't some artistic whim you can indulge. This is your career." "I understand that," Alara replied, her gaze finding Reese, who was leaning against a stone wall, watching her with a patient, supportive expression. His presence was a quiet anchor. "But I can't force it. The stories I was telling, they don't resonate anymore. I need to find new ones. And I think I'm starting to, here." Evelyn huffed. "Well, you'd better find them fast, or we'll have to consider other options." The call ended abruptly, leaving Alara holding a dead phone, a mix of relief and trepidation washing over her. Reese approached her slowly. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Alara let out a shaky breath. "It was my editor. She's not happy. I told her I couldn't write the old story anymore." Reese's expression softened. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, a comforting weight. "And that's a brave thing to do, Alara, to choose your own path even when it's difficult." His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles. "Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead us to where we're truly meant to be." His touch, his quiet understanding, was exactly what she needed. The fear of failure, of disappointing Evelyn, was still there, but it felt smaller, less overwhelming now that she wasn't facing it alone. She squeezed his hand. A silent, "Thank you." The following days settled into a rhythm that Alara found herself cherishing. Mornings were for walks on the beach, collecting shells, or simply watching the waves. Afternoons were spent in the cottage, Alara reading or sketching, sometimes even jotting down notes in a small leather-bound notebook she'd found in her bag. They were not for her old manuscript, but for new ideas, fragments of stories inspired by the rugged coastline, the resilient villagers, and the quiet man who lived across the hall. Reese would work in his workshop, the soft sound of his tools a comforting presence, or tend to his small, wild garden. Evenings were the best. They cooked together, simple, hearty meals. Fresh fish caught by local fishermen, root vegetables from Mrs. Gable's store, warm, crusty bread. The small kitchen, filled with the aroma of herbs and simmering food, became a hub of shared laughter and comfortable conversation. They talked about everything and nothing, the history of St. Jude's Cove, Reese's childhood growing up by the sea, Alara's dreams of faraway places, the books they loved. One evening, a storm rolled in, fierce and sudden. The wind howled like a banshee around the cottage, rattling the window panes, and the rain lashed down with relentless force. The sea, usually a calming presence, roared with an untamed fury. Alara, who had always found storms unsettling, felt a tremor of anxiety. Reese, sensing her unease, built a roaring fire in the hearth. "Don't worry," he said, his voice reassuring. "The cottage is old, but it's sturdy. It's seen many storms." They sat on the rug before the fire, mugs of hot chocolate warming their hands. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the small room feel even cozier, a safe haven against the wildness outside. The storm outside seemed to amplify the intimacy within, making them huddle closer, sharing the warmth. "I used to hate storms," Alara admitted, pulling her knees up to her chest. "They always made me feel so small, so vulnerable." Whis reached out, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on her knee. His touch was warm, steady. "They can be that, yes, but they can also be beautiful, in their own way. A reminder of how powerful nature is, and how resilient we can be, even when the world feels like it's falling apart." He squeezed her hand lightly. "You're not alone in this storm, Alara." His words, simple yet profound, brought a lump to her throat. She looked at him, truly seeing the empathy in his eyes, the unwavering support. In that moment, surrounded by the wild symphony of the storm, she felt a surge of courage. "I used to be so afraid of being alone," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. After a difficult time in my life, I built walls to protect myself. I thought it was safer that way." She looked into the dancing flames. "But it just made me lonely, and it made me lose my way." Whis listened, his gaze unwavering, full of understanding. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix her. He simply listened, his presence a comforting anchor. When she finished, he spoke softly. "We all build walls, Alara, to protect what's fragile inside. But sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is find someone we trust enough to let them see past them." He paused, then his eyes met hers, full of a tender sincerity that made her heart ache in the most beautiful way. "And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave." The raw honesty of the moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotions. The storm outside raged, but inside, a new quietude settled. Their eyes locked, and in the depths of Whis's blue gaze, Alara saw not just understanding, but something deeper, something that mirrored the burgeoning hope in her own heart. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Whis leaned closer. Alara's breath hitched, her gaze falling to his lips, then back to his eyes, seeking confirmation. She saw it there, a gentle question, a silent invitation. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into, drawn by an irresistible force. His lips met hers, soft and tentative at first, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. It was a kiss of quiet tenderness, of shared vulnerability, of a promise whispered without words. It tasted of salt and warmth and the unspoken emotions that had been building between them. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but one that offered comfort and a profound sense of belonging. As their lips parted, they remained close, foreheads touching, the world outside fading into a distant roar. "Alara," he breathed, his voice a low, husky whisper against her skin. She simply closed her eyes, savoring the moment, the feeling of his hand, still gently cupping hers. For the first time, she felt truly, completely safe. The storm eventually quieted, its fury spent, leaving behind a world washed clean and renewed. The next morning, the sun streamed through the cottage windows, painting the room in hues of gold. Alara woke with a lightness in her spirit she hadn't felt in years. The kiss, tender and heartfelt, had sealed something unspoken between them, a new chapter officially begun. She found Whis in the kitchen, making tea, a quiet smile on his face as he looked at her. There was no awkwardness, only a profound sense of comfort. "Sleep well?" he asked, his eyes soft. "Better than I have in years," she admitted, her cheeks flushing faintly. After a leisurely breakfast, Alara felt an unfamiliar pull towards her small, leather-bound notebook. She carried it to the window seat, looking out at the calm, shimmering sea. The words, which had been so stubbornly absent for so long, now flowed with an effortless grace. She didn't write about ancient castles or dramatic duels. She wrote about the quiet strength of the sea, the resilience of the cliffs, the warmth of a cottage fire, and the gentle understanding in a pair of blue eyes. She wrote about finding home in an unexpected place, and finding herself in the process. Whis, watching her from his armchair, a book open in his lap, simply smiled. He didn't interrupt, didn't question. He just let her write, a quiet guardian of her newfound inspiration. Later, as the afternoon light began to mellow, Alara closed her notebook, a sense of deep satisfaction settling over her. She had written for hours, the words pouring out of her as if a dam had finally broken. "I think," she said, turning to Whis, "I found my story. Or rather, it's found me." Whis's eyes lit up. "I knew you would, Alara." She held up the notebook. "It's not what Evelyn wants. It's different. It's about this place. About the people here. A bit." She trailed off, then met his gaze, a soft smile on her lips. "About finding your way back to yourself, in a place you never expected." He returned her smile, a warmth radiating from him that touched her soul. "It sounds like the most important story you could ever tell." They spent the rest of the day in comfortable companionship, discussing her ideas, Whis offering insights into the local lore, sharing stories of the cove's history. Alara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. The future still held uncertainties, especially concerning her career, but for the first time she felt equipped to face them. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had found a sanctuary, a source of inspiration, and a heart that understood her own. The sea had called her here, and in its gentle embrace, and in the quiet strength of Whis, she was finally learning to truly live, and to write the story of her own unfolding heart. The chapters ahead were unwritten, but filled with the promise of sun-drenched days, whispered confidences, and the enduring magic of St. Jude's Cove. The chapters ahead were unwritten, but filled with the promise of sun-drenched days, whispered confidences, and the enduring magic of St. Jude's Cove. And indeed, the days that followed unfurled like the gentle waves on the shore, each bringing a new layer of beauty and understanding to Alara's world. Mornings began with the scent of salt and brewing coffee, often shared on Ray's small, sun-drenched porch, watching his sturdy hands mend nets or carve a new piece of driftwood into a smooth, tactile shape. Alara would sit nearby, her notebook open, the words flowing with an ease she hadn't known in years. His quiet presence was a muse, his steady rhythm a counterpoint to the restless energy that had once defined her. Their conversations, initially tentative, deepened with each passing sunset. Whis spoke of the sea as if it were an old friend, recounting tales of hidden coves, ancient shipwrecks, and the shifting moods of the water. Alara, in turn, shared her dreams, her fears, and the intricate worlds she crafted with words. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly seen, his gaze unwavering, his hand occasionally reaching out to cover hers, a silent anchor in her often turbulent thoughts. She found herself writing a story unlike any she had before, one steeped in the raw beauty of the coast, in the quiet strength of its people, and in the profound, unexpected joy of finding home in a place she'd only just discovered. One blustery afternoon, a letter arrived from her publisher, a stark reminder of the world beyond St. Jude's Cove Bedtime. It was an urgent request for her to return to the city, to promote her previous unreleased novel, to re-engage with the demanding literary scene. A familiar tremor of anxiety, a ghost of her old life, snaked through her. She felt the pull of obligation, the whisper of ambition, but also a deep reluctance to leave the sanctuary she had found. Whis, seeing the furrow in her brow as she read, simply sat beside her, offering a mug of steaming tea. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Alara sighed, folding the letter. "They want me back. The city, the interviews, the pressure. It feels like a different lifetime now." She looked out at the churning gray sea, then at him. "I don't know if I can go back, or if I even want to." Whis took a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The sea calls to some, Alara, and pulls others back to shore. There's no right or wrong, only what feels true to you." He turned to her, his blue eyes holding a depth she hadn't fully appreciated until now. "But if this place, if actuality, have become a part of your truth, then perhaps you needn't leave it entirely behind." He reached out, taking her hand. His touch was warm, reassuring. "You write your own story, remember? And you decide where the next chapter takes you." His words, simple yet profound, settled over her like a comforting blanket. She realized then that the challenges she had felt equipped to face weren't external monsters, but internal doubts, the echoes of a past self. And with Whis, she didn't just feel equipped. She felt brave. That evening, As the lighthouse beam swept across the darkening waves, Ilara made a decision. She wrote back to her publisher, explaining that while she would fulfill her obligations remotely, her new work, her guide to true work, demanded her presence in St. Jude's Cove. She spoke of a new direction, a deeper well of inspiration, and hinted at a love story unfolding by the sea. Later, sitting by the hearth in Rhys's cottage, the fire casting dancing shadows on their faces, she turned to him. "Rhys," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "I've been writing about you." A slow smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. "I thought you might be," he murmured, his thumb gently tracing the back of her hand. "The way you watch the gulls, the way your pen dances on the page when I'm mending nets, I could feel it. And I don't want to leave it," she confessed, her heart pounding. "I don't want to leave you." Rhys's gaze softened, reflecting the warm glow of the fire. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. "You don't have to, Ilara. Not ever. This cove, this cottage, my heart, they're yours. They've been waiting for you." He pressed a kiss to her hair, then gently tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. "I never thought I'd find someone who understood the quiet language of this place, or of my own soul. But you do. You hear the stories in the waves just like I do. And you've brought a new one to life right here." Ilara leaned into him, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. The love she felt for Rhys was as vast and reassuring as the ocean itself, a gentle tide that had carried her home. She knew her writing would never be the same. It would be imbued with the salt spray, the quiet strength, and the deep, unwavering love she had found. Her next novel, the one born of St. Jude's Cove, would be her truest work yet, a testament to the transformative power of finding one's sanctuary. As the moon climbed high, casting a silver path across the water, Ilara nestled deeper into Rhys's embrace. The chapters ahead were still unwritten, but they no longer felt daunting. Instead, they promised a lifetime of shared dawns, of whispered dreams, and of a love as enduring and magical as the ancient tides. In the gentle rhythm of Rhys's breathing, and the distant murmur of the sea, Ilara knew she had found her forever story. And the most beautiful ending of all.